So the Commonwealth Summit will be officially opened here in Colombo tomorrow by the Prince of Wales. But already the summit is being overshadowed by the row over Sri Lanka's human rights record. David Cameron has rejected calls to follow Canada and India and Mauritius in boycotting the event, but he says he will press President Mahinda Rajapaksa to launch proper investigations into what he calls the appalling scenes of civilians being killed at the end of the civil war. He'll also raise the concerns of relatives of people who have disappeared, they say, at the hands of the Sri Lankan authorities. Our Foreign Affairs correspondent Jonathan Miller has this report.
Just after 6:30 local time this evening, Prince Charles met Mahinda Rajapaksa, a man whose many critics say has blood on his hands. He is accused of war crimes and grievous human rights abuse. Not many of the 50 presidents and prime ministers attending tomorrow's summit seem too bothered though David Cameron has pledged to talk tough. Mahinda Rajapaksa's government scoffed at this today. "We're not a colony," one minister said. The president said he had nothing to hide.
If anyone who wants to complain about a human rights violation in Sri Lanka, whether it is torture, whether it is rape, whether it is... We have a system. You all must respect the system of a country, the culture of a country. People were getting killed for 30 years. At least after 2009, we have stopped it. We have stopped it now. There is no killing at the moment.
As he said this, and just a few miles across town, an everyday human rights crisis was developing, caught by an amateur cameraman. Buddhist nationalists belonging to the ethnic Sinhalese majority are protesting the presence of what they say are terrorist suspects from the Tamil North. By the time we arrived, the protesters have been replaced by police who want to question these terrorist suspects. We were taken in to see them. Here they are, a group of people whose loved ones had vanished without trace. They'd come to Colombo to publicise their plight during the Commonwealth conference. The Sri Lankan government would prefer all this to remain hidden for now. They told me their stories, abductions of sons or husbands lifted from homes or off the streets. Sri Lanka has more unresolved disappearances than any other country bar Iraq.
This is happening as the Commonwealth heads of government
arrive
in Colombo.
So you can tell your ministers and the prime ministers what's happening in Sri Lanka. What they are telling is not taking place practically. So that's what's happening. They say we can go free, but these mothers, you can see, they are afraid now. They know that the CID fellows will follow them. They know that when they go back, they will be questioned, unnecessary questions. So they are afraid. So I'm responsible because we all invited them.
I'm going to walk down the road in a moment here to talk to 3 plainclothes police officers, senior officers, who I've had identified to me, who are directing this operation. I want to find out exactly why they're here and why this intimidation is going on. Hi, my name's Jonathan Miller from Channel 4. Can you just explain to me what the police are actually doing here today?
I can't understand I can't understand.
You don't speak English? Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Could I ask you, sir, could you just explain to me what is actually happening in this operation today? Because I understand you're actually in charge of it. Why are the police actually here today? Sorry, sir?
Problem with language.
You don't speak English very well. No. Okay. I'm sorry I don't speak Sinhala. But I'm just interested to know why the police are here.
You talk police officers.
Okay, but you're police officers.
No. Police officers. You talk
but I understand that you are also police officers, sir.
Police officers. Yes.
All right. Thank you very much. The families want to go home by train, but the police say they can't let them go without questioning. But after hours of waiting and press attention, they suddenly... Please don't walk away, sir. Just explain. Are they safe to go? Why are they suddenly safe to go? Has the situation changed? Is there no threat against them? No threat. They are safe to go. No threat of arrest. So why were the police outside for so long waiting? Why did you inform these people that you wanted them to come to the police station? Unsure whether to trust the police, not to arrest them, and having missed their train north, the Tamil families finally got on the bus. Thousands have disappeared without trace in Sri Lanka. Their loved ones cannot even ask why.
The Prime Minister David Cameron landed about 20 minutes ago here in Sri Lanka. He's argued that by coming to the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting rather than boycotting it, he's better able, in his words, to shine a spotlight on the human rights situation here. He said there are a number of issues he wants to raise with the Sri Lankan government.
There's the problem with human rights as we speak today, the people who have disappeared, the lack of free rights for journalists and a free press. But I think perhaps most important of all is the need for proper investigations to look into what happened at the end of this very long and appalling civil war that took place, and these appalling scenes that we've seen on our television screen of civilians being killed.
Well, we hope to be talking with David Cameron on this programme tomorrow night. Now, they come in the dead of night in unmarked white vans. Suspects are told they're needed for questioning. They are never seen again. That is the account of hundreds of relatives of the so-called disappeared in Sri Lanka. After Iraq, as you've heard, the country now suffers the highest number of forced abductions in the world. Thousands vanished at the end of the war, but the abductions continue to this day. Human rights groups say on average one person is disappeared every 5 days. The Indian filmmaker Leena Mani travelled undercover across Sri Lanka to meet the families of the disappeared, who are determined to speak out despite the huge risks of doing so.
எனது அன்பு மகளுக்கு நான் என்னுடைய அன்பு மகளை எழுதிக் கொள்வது என் செல்லமே நீங்கள் எங்கு இருக்கிறீர்கள்.
In a village in northern Sri Lanka, a mother writes to her missing daughter.
நல்ல சுகமாய் இருப்பீங்கள் என்று நினைத்துக் கொண்டே அம்மா வாழ்ந்து வருகின்றேன். மகளே நீ எப்ப எங்களிடம் வருவாய்?
She sends the letters to the many unofficial camps where thousands of displaced Tamils from Sri Lanka's civil war remain, in the hope that someone will read them out.
இந்த மடல் யாராவது கையில் கிடைத்தால் எனது மகளின் பெயர் துவாரகா. இந்த கடிதத்தை என் மகளிடம் கொடுத்து விடுங்கள்.
For 4 years now, Chandra has been searching for Dwaraka, who disappeared with thousands of others at the end of the war.
எனது மகள் துவாரகாவை ஜெயிலிட்டு பிடிச்சு சண்டை மாத்திரம் எல்லாம் சண்டையில ராணுவத்தை சரணடைஞ்சிருங்க நம்பிக்கையில இருந்தேன்.
Chandra's search has taken her to the UN, human rights groups, and even the President himself. Still, she has heard nothing. So she goes from temple to temple, making offerings to the gods, and even to the fortune teller.
நான் உங்கள்ட்ட வந்த மாதிரியுமா இல்ல தெய்வங்களும் போனது தானே?
மூத்த பிள்ளை அவங்கள எல்லாம் போனது.
மூத்த பிள்ளை இல்ல.
இருக்கிறதா அவங்களுக்கு ஒரு அறிகுறியுமே இல்லையம்மா.
இதுக்கும் வந்து பூக்கட்டி வச்சு பார்த்தேன்.
Chandra is not alone. Thousands of mothers across the Tamil North are still searching for their children. International organizations say up to 100,000 people remain unaccounted for. The filmmaker Leena Mani travelled undercover across the region now under military occupation. Human rights activists speak of a Cold War here, a population under surveillance.
Can we undertake video? No.
Yet despite the climate of fear, relatives of the missing have taken to the streets. They're determined to make their voices heard. Among the crowd is Jaya. She blames herself for the disappearance of her son, Ravathan, a Tamil tiger who surrendered at the end of the war.
அப்ப அரசாங்கத்தை நம்பித்தான் ஒவ்வொரு பெற்றோரும் தங்களோட பிள்ளைகளை கையெழுத்தது. இப்போ நாங்கள் உள்ளதுக்கு போய் எங்களோட பிள்ளைகளை காணையில் பதிஞ்சிட்டோ கேட்டுட்டோ வந்துட்டோம்னா அடுத்த நாளைக்கு இங்கே எங்களை விசாரிக்கிற ஒரு குழு வரும். இந்த மகன்ற விடயத்தில் கிட்டத்தட்ட 25-26 விசாரணை இது வரைக்கும் எனக்கு முடிஞ்சது. இவே ஒரு குறிப்பிட்ட காலத்துக்கு வச்சிருந்துட்டு அதுகளை கொலை செய்து போட்டு சித்திரவதை செய்து போட்டு தூக்கி இவை பிணமா நியாயம் எறிஞ்ச மாதிரி இவே அறிய அப்படியெல்லாம் இவை செய்ய வேண்டிய தேவை எங்களுக்கு இல்லை தானே இந்த அரசாங்கம்.
Disappearances have a long history in this country. Far from the Tamil North is this memorial to thousands who disappeared in the 1980s, most members of an outlawed Sinhalese underground rebel movement. Ashila is herself Sinhalese. She's never found out what happened to her father, who was taken from his home more than 20 years ago.
දැනට ඉන්න ජනාධිපති මහින්ද රාජපක්ෂ එයා මූලිකත්වය අරගෙන වැඩ කරා මේ ඉෂුවට සම්බන්ධව. අපිට තියෙන කනගාටුව ඒක. එයා ඒ වෙලාවේ ජිනීවා අරගෙන ගියා මේ අතුරුදහන් වූවන්ගේ ඩොකියුමන්ට් එකක් හදලා ඒව අරගෙන ජිනීවා එයා ගියා. එතකොට එයා ඒ වෙලාවේ අතුරුදහන් වීම වෙනුවෙන් ෆයිට් කරා. දැන් එයා ලංකාවේ අතුරුදහන් වීම සිද්ධ කරනවා.
Human rights activists say under President Rajapaksa, someone is abducted every 5 days, with snatch squads operating across the country. It is denied forcibly by the government, yet so many tell the same story. How suspects are taken away in unmarked white vans. They are never seen again.
சஹில் மொழி கலர் தட்டிக்கேட்டு
அந்த டைமில் எங்களை வீட்டுக்குள்ளே 4-5 பேர் வந்து எங்கள் அப்பாவை கூப்பிட்டாங்க. இங்கே வாங்க கொஞ்சம் விசாரணை இருக்கு போகணும்.
You won't die, you won't live, you will just disappear.
நீ பயப்படாதம்மா, காலையில் ஒரு ஹஸ்பண்டை கொண்டு வந்து விடுறேன்.
இல்லை வாங்க உங்களை கூட்டிக் கொண்டு போயிட்டு நாங்கள் கூட்டிக் கொண்டு வருவோம்.
கூட்ட சொல்லிட்டு அங்கே வேனில் ஏற்றிட்டு போயிட்டாங்க.
When you know you are white fan, you are dead.
Rasir and her husband Shahil Malawi were Muslims who were forced to flee their home by the Tamil Tigers during the war. She says the army moved in on him after he tried to bridge the divide between Muslims and Tamils. Well, I'm joined now by Jonathan Miller, our Foreign Affairs correspondent, who's been here now 4 days and whose report you saw earlier. Your overall impression from the first 4 days here in Sri Lanka, a country that has not been easy for us to visit of late?
Yeah, we haven't been in here, John, for 4.5 years since we were unceremoniously kicked out right at the very end of the war, and I have had the full flavour in the last 4 days. A very striking experience tonight meeting some local journalists who were reporting on the same event as I was at, that standoff with the police and some of those families of the disappeared. They said to me, now you can really see what it's like here, now you can really see what we're up against. And I have been quite moved by the way in which these local journalists have been able to report despite enormous restrictions and threats against themselves in a very, very repressive environment. It's a scary place, John. Bad things happen and happen a lot.
I'm just producing for you my pass because something happened to me tonight which was interesting. I wanted to go and talk to some of the delegations because that's an important way to find out how everything's going. And I've been to many Prime Minister's conferences actually down the years, and you always go and mess with them in the bars, at the hotels and the rest. We're banned from the hotels. No media. We're a threat to security, in the words of the senior police officer. Channel 4 News in particular is picked upon as being a particular threat, and we are now being labelled, well, effectively Tamil Tigers.
Yeah, we are, and I think there was an incident a couple of days ago when I managed to doorstep the President Rajapaksa outside one of the hotels. There was a conference venue. Apparently after a very brief chat in which I asked him whether he was concerned about these allegations of war crimes which have dogged him in the 5 years since the war, he got into his car and was absolutely furious. He was livid. And the upshot of this is that a government minister today announced an investigation as to how it all came about, that there wasn't sufficient security around the president at that time. It is very hard to get to these figures. It's very hard to ask the questions. We've put in for several interviews with senior ministers. None of them have come through. And there's one in particular that I would like to talk to. His name is Gotabaya Rajapaksa. He is one of the brothers who run this country. and he is the Defence Secretary. He's unelected, and he is credited, I use the word probably completely wrongly there, with ending this war. But the Sinhalese people are very grateful for the fact that all these years of terror are behind them now. Gotabaya Rajapaksa is blamed by virtually everyone I speak to for the climate of fear that has enveloped this country and having turned it into what is essentially a police state.
Jonathan Miller, that's all from here for the moment.